the US is overspending on its budget. We've got some great statistics here.
Yeah, last year we spent more in the fiscal year than we ever have in the history of the United States. And not only that, we did bring in the most amount of money we ever did, but we're still spending 1.4 trillion more dollars than we did last year. So this breaks it down. usafacts.org. If you're not familiar with the website, awesome website, gives you a lot of good facts. So you can see $483.5 billion we spent on interest payments alone last year. Some of the largest companies in the world aren't even worth $483 billion.
And interestingly, that is actually about 100 billion more than we spent last year. And that's all because of interest rates rising, isn't it? You know, when they refinance bonds, they have to refinance them at a higher rate. And so it's added 100 billion or more in payments per year, just, you know, the interest rates rising, which is crazy.
Yeah, so it's also interesting to think that the government is the one raising the interest rates on themselves. They're getting hit trying to fight the inflation, trying to do whatever they can, but they also brought in the most money last year too, a little over $5 trillion in revenue, which is pretty crazy. You know, the income is $2.63 trillion. I find that even more interesting because on here you don't see anything that has to do directly with tariffs or things like that. And our country before 1913 fundamentally ran on tariffs. We ran on import business. So if you wanted to sell products here in the United States, you brought it over, we taxed you for it, and that's where our income came from. The personal income tax was only supposed to be a temporary fix to what was going on in the government, but as you know, temporary means forever in any government. So here we are 110 years later, still absorbing the brunt of temporary 1913.
And now the income tax is the biggest tax that we have, isn't it? It generates the most revenue of any tax. Payroll tax is second, and payroll tax is basically the same thing as income tax anyway, because
Right.
it's on your salary. So it's just a kind of a code word for more income tax. And then, you know, the next category down doesn't even come close.
Yeah, they're not even near that amount of revenue. That's the corporate income tax, which to me is fine. It makes sense. You're doing business here in America. That's where the corporations pay based on the profits that they return from their business dealings. Now, the other thing that I found really interesting is that if we're spending $6.4 trillion, and it says down at the bottom there, other spending. What exactly is other spending? Is this where our funds are being sent to places like Ukraine and other countries, and we're fighting wars for them? Or, well, what exactly is going on there? So it's a little bit interesting to think about. You know, there's 1.16 trillion dollars that other spending. So that means it's spread out. I think that there's a lot of details in here that are overpriced. That the government does a little bit more tightening, they can get things for a lot cheaper. So that's the idea, is that if you can actually look at your spending in the government like a business and say, how do I become profitable? And how do we at the same time have, you know, social care and everything else that we need in America, but we still maintain our profits? I mean, there's companies that do that. And so there has to be ways for us to do it as a nation.
Right.
And if we don't do it, and we do, you know, 1.4 trillion passed to our debt every year, I mean, there's no end in sight.
It's incredible. Yeah, they're stratospheric numbers. We're nowhere near balancing the budget or being able to pay back the debt. What's amazing as well in those statistics that you shared, the government spends $19,434 per person. I don't feel like I've had $19,000 spent on me this year at all.
And it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. Like that 19,000 can. How about if you just give me the 19,000, and the rest of the people in the United States, and we'll see how even cut that to 9,000 per person is okay.
Exactly right, because you need to spend some money on the military and roads and things like that. But yeah, let's say they gave half of it back to you. I mean, I would definitely appreciate that.
Most of the roads actually are maintained by the county, the state,
The
or the
state.
local municipalities. And so, but they also do, the state receives funding for roads from the federal government, depending on what they're doing for the infrastructure. But the maintenance of those roads after that infrastructure has been put in is meant to be maintained by those municipalities, counties, and states. So a lot of this money that you see being spent really doesn't reach people. Social Security is probably the closest. And if you talk to somebody who survives on Social Security, it's the same thing every single conversation. I'm barely surviving, or I get, free meals from the delivery meals, or, I have all this. So it's like $1.2 trillion. Is there a better way to spend that? I mean, the government, when they bailed out the automakers, made hundreds of billions of dollars. Can we spend, maybe 200 billion and see if they put the money in Meta, they would have doubled their money this year.
Investing it like a sovereign wealth fund, basically,
Yeah,
like they have in
exactly.
Saudi
Kind of like
Arabia and
Saudi
stuff.
Arabia does, you know? I
Yeah.
think that would be really intelligent, something that could work out, because we do it with the central bank now.
They can also insider trade as well. We can put Nancy Pelosi in charge of it, or Nancy Pelosi's husband. We can put him
Yeah.
in charge of the sovereign wealth fund, and he can trade based off of policies that Congress is making.
And then we'll cover all, and then people in Social Security can actually feel like they're living normal life. I like that idea. Nancy, if you're listening, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so that's kind of what is interesting to me, is that if we could really treat our spending like a business, we could probably reduce our necessary for revenue, and at the same time, um, make better lifestyles for the people that are supported by the programs that the government pays for, like the veterans and the Medicare and things like that. Like there's better ways to go about doing that.